At my family gathering, they made an announcement that changed everything. No joke. After 12 years of quietly building my empire, they decided to publicly humiliate me about finally buying a house, and their reward? Finding out I owned something they never imagined in their wildest dreams. I'm Victoria, I'm 32 years old, and my own family tried to destroy me at what should have been a celebration. Before I tell you how one real estate agent's innocent question exposed their 12-year scam and flipped their world upside down in front of everyone, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can reach. Picture this, for 12 years of my life since I turned 20, every single decision I made was about two things: building my empire and surviving their exploitation. I wasn't just saving money. I was creating wealth, building a foundation they couldn't touch, couldn't control. I worked every angle you can imagine, coding freelance projects until 3 a.m., launching startups from my dorm room, turning side hustles into profitable ventures. You name it, I probably monetized it. I put myself through state university, then got my MBA while working full-time, and finally launched my own tech company. For 8 years building that empire, I lived modestly, drove a reliable but unremarkable car, and reinvested every profit back into my business. Every strategic move went toward one goal: total financial independence. 2 months ago, I made my latest acquisition, a waterfront estate in an exclusive neighborhood. Nothing ostentatious for me personally, but it had a stunning view and a home office where I could run my company in peace. The moment the realtor handed me the keys, I felt a quiet satisfaction wash over me. I walked through the professionally designed rooms, the scent of ocean air filling my lungs. It was the smell of success, of true independence. It was validation of everything I'd built. I had done it, all of it, despite them. That peaceful feeling lasted until the family gathering 2 weeks later. Then the performance began. I should have expected it, but the sheer audacity still caught me off guard. We were all gathered in my stepfather's living room when my mother decided to make her grand announcement. She stood up with that practiced smile she wore when she wanted to appear magnanimous. "Everyone, I have wonderful news to share about Victoria," she proclaimed, her voice dripping with condescending pride. She finally managed to buy her first house. It only took her 12 years, but better late than never, right? Such a late bloomer, our Victoria. The room erupted in polite laughter. Relatives nodded approvingly, as if my supposed struggle was both expected and amusing. I sat there, maintaining my composed expression, feeling the familiar burn of their casual cruelty. Then Chloe, my stepsister, couldn't resist adding her own twist to the humiliation. She leaned forward with that smug grin she'd perfected since childhood. "Well, at least now she can finally afford to pay her own property taxes," she announced triumphantly. "No more monthly checks to mom and dad." The laughter grew louder. 12 years of secretly paying their property taxes, $3,000 every month, totaling over $430,000, reduced to a punchline. 12 years of keeping their house from foreclosure, treated like charity they were generous enough to accept from their struggling daughter. I was about to respond when fate intervened in the most spectacular way possible. The doorbell rang. My stepfather opened it to reveal a well-dressed woman with a tablet and a professional smile. She was clearly a real estate agent, probably there for the neighbors. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said politely, "but I'm looking for the owner of the waterfront estate on Maple Drive. The GPS brought me to this address, but..." She paused, looking around the modest living room with obvious confusion. Then her eyes landed on me, and recognition dawned. "Wait, Miss Chen? Victoria Chen?" Her professional demeanor shifted to genuine excitement. "You're the CEO of Tech Vision Corp. I handled your estate purchase last month. What an honor to meet you again." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. Every face turned toward me with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning horror. The real estate agent, oblivious to the family drama she'd just detonated, continued enthusiastically. I have to say, the waterfront estate is absolutely stunning. The $2.8 million price point was perfectly justified for that location and those amenities. Your business must be doing incredibly well. Chloe's face went white. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. My stepfather looked like he'd seen a ghost. I stood up slowly, my composure intact, and smiled at the agent. "Thank you." "Yes, business is quite good," I said calmly. "I think you might be looking for the Henderson property next door." As the agent apologized and left, I turned back to my family. The room remained frozen in stunned silence. 12 years of their condescension, their pity, their casual exploitation, all of it crumbling in real time. The smell in the room was no longer just tension. It was the scent of a house of cards collapsing, and the sweet aroma of long overdue truth finally coming to light. I looked at each of their shocked faces, that impossible, revelatory moment hanging in the air. It wasn't just money that had been exposed. It was the price tag they had unknowingly put on their own credibility. And as I stood there, a single, cold realization crystallized in my mind: this was just the beginning. After the real estate agent's bombshell, I felt like I was standing in the eye of a hurricane. For 2 days, I just moved through my waterfront estate like a ghost. I didn't work. I didn't take calls. I just processed the magnitude of what had been exposed. The person I needed to talk to wasn't a therapist, not yet. It was the only person who had ever understood the real scope of my ambitions, Marcus. Marcus and I had worked together at my previous tech job before I launched my own company. He was about 10 years older than me, a sharp, strategic thinker who'd been a corporate lawyer before burning out and switching to business consulting. He found the clean logic of contracts more satisfying than the messy emotions of family drama. We were business partners now, meeting monthly to discuss legal strategy and market positioning over expensive coffee. I called him on a Thursday morning, my voice carefully controlled. "Marcus, do you have time for an emergency consultation? You sound unusually tense, Victoria. What's the situation?" I need strategic advice. The legal kind of strategy. We met for lunch at an upscale bistro downtown. I laid out the complete financial history across the white tablecloth. Marcus put on his reading glasses, his expression shifting from professional interest to calculating fury on my behalf. He reviewed every document, his salmon forgotten. "Let me understand this completely," he said finally, sliding the papers back towards me. "They've been collecting $3,000 monthly from you for 12 years under the pretense of family contribution, totaling $432,000, while publicly portraying you as financially struggling?" I just nodded, my jaw clenched tight. This is systematic financial exploitation. It's legally actionable fraud," he said, then he leaned forward. "But Victoria, fraud claims can be complicated. This is going to require surgical precision. This is corporate-level strategy." "I understand," I said quietly. "What do you want as the outcome?" "Really?" "Complete severance," I said, my voice crystallizing with resolve. My stepfather had called me 2 days after the gathering. He didn't apologize. He didn't acknowledge the revelation. He just tried to control the narrative. The conversation was burned into my memory. I was in my home office, reviewing quarterly reports, when my phone rang. "Victoria," he'd said, his voice artificially warm. No greeting, no small talk. "Richard, I assume you're calling about what happened at dinner." "I need you to understand the family's position," he interrupted. "Chloe is in a difficult situation. She has all that debt from her lifestyle choices. She can't maintain her image without stability. A young woman needs security." The audacity was breathtaking. "Security, Richard? I've been providing your security for 12 years. This ends now." "Don't be dramatic," he snapped. "This is simple for you. You're obviously wealthy. You can absorb Chloe's expenses. This is about family unity. My name is on my assets, Richard. I built this company. I earned this success. It's mine. I'd never been this direct with him before. My voice was ice cold, but my mind was calculating every angle. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then his tone shifted, becoming threatening. You will regret this attitude, Victoria. Family loyalty should come first. He hung up. 2 days later, Chloe's social media campaign began targeting my reputation. Marcus listened to the complete story, his expression growing more predatory by the minute. So they've been systematically exploiting your success while publicly diminishing your achievements, and now they want to escalate when their cash cow threatens to break free? Exactly, I said, setting down my coffee with deliberate precision. Understood, Marcus said, his voice shifting into strategic mode. First priority, we need comprehensive documentation. Everything. Every transaction, every communication, every public statement they've made. They don't have money for serious legal representation, Marcus. All their resources come from exploiting me. I know, but you can't handle this emotionally. This requires surgical precision. What if I handled it differently? The idea was elegant, and it crystallized as I spoke. What if I used my actual position? My real influence? I have leverage they don't even know exists. My company has contracts worth millions. My recommendations carry weight in this industry. Everything is documented in corporate systems. I gestured toward my briefcase. And here. I tapped my temple with a cold smile. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. I expected him to counsel caution, but instead, he gave me a slow, approving nod. You're a CEO, Victoria. You identify market inefficiencies. You eliminate unprofitable relationships. You optimize resource allocation. Maybe this is just another business problem requiring strategic restructuring. He paused. And if you pursue this approach, I'll coordinate the legal framework. We'll make this textbook corporate justice. For the first time in days, I felt the familiar thrill of a well-planned strategy taking shape. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a CEO with substantial resources and a clear objective. The thought was energizing, powerful, almost intoxicating. I straightened up, smoothed my blazer, and looked at Marcus with renewed focus. Let's restructure this relationship, I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd built over years of corporate leadership. Permanently. The drive back to my office felt different. The weight on my shoulders had transformed from burden to fuel. It felt strategic, manageable, profitable. But I knew this was just the opening move. Marcus was right, they had declared economic war, and they had no idea they were fighting someone who owned the battlefield. The days that followed were a masterclass in strategic intelligence gathering. The evidence arrived through multiple channels, social media posts, financial records, and intercepted communications that revealed the true scope of their operation. It was all there in digital black and white, the $432,000 exploitation, documented with methodical precision. They had weaponized my generosity. Monthly property tax payments, $3,000. Emergency loans to Chloe, $8,000. A calculated extraction of every success I'd achieved over 12 years. It was systematic financial abuse disguised as family obligation. I sat in my executive home office, multiple monitors displaying the evidence. It was comprehensive. It was damning. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. How could they maintain this facade? How could they systematically drain my resources while publicly portraying me as struggling? My first instinct was to confront them directly, to demand explanations, to ask how the people who raised me could orchestrate such elaborate deception. But I didn't. Instead, I called the one person in my family who had always seen through their manipulation, my grandmother. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was a retired educator, a woman of sharp intellect and unwavering moral compass. She carried herself with the dignity of someone who'd spent decades shaping young minds. She answered on the first ring. "Grandmother," I said, my voice carefully modulated. "Victoria, you sound like you're processing something significant, dear." I took a measured breath and laid out the complete financial picture. I showed her the documentation, the pattern of exploitation. I waited for her to express surprise, or perhaps to suggest I was overreacting. But she remained thoughtfully silent. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of accumulated wisdom and deep disappointment. "I'm heartbroken, Victoria, but not surprised," she said. "Your mother. She's lost her way, and Richard is amplifying her worst tendencies. I need to understand, grandmother. How did this become so systematized?" Another contemplative pause. "It's not just them," she said, and I felt my strategic mind shift into high alert. "Patricia and I received a call yesterday from your Aunt Margaret." Aunt Margaret, Richard's older sister. She had always been calculating, superficially charming during family gatherings, always commenting on my modest lifestyle with thinly veiled condescension. But I'd often noticed her studying my business cards and asking pointed questions about my company's valuation. "What's her involvement?" I asked. "She orchestrated this entire strategy," my grandmother said, her voice carrying educator's authority. "She researched the financial documentation requirements. She's coordinating the social media campaign. She's funding Chloe's lifestyle to maintain the narrative." The architecture of their deception suddenly became clear. "What's her motivation?" "Envy, Victoria. Professional jealousy. She spent years watching your success while her own investments failed. She sees your independence, your achievements, and she's systematically poisoning your family against you, convincing them they deserve a share of what you've built." This wasn't just family dysfunction. This was corporate-level conspiracy, a coordinated campaign to appropriate my assets. Just as I was processing this intelligence, the next phase of their operation launched. Chloe, my entitled stepsister, escalated her social media offensive with strategic precision. It began with a professionally photographed image of her posing outside my corporate headquarters, designer outfit carefully curated. The caption, "Excited to join the family business. Big announcements coming. #blessed, #entrepreneur life, #TechSEO." Then came the lifestyle content, carefully staged photos with captions like, "When your successful sister finally realizes family comes first, and sometimes the most talented people need family support to reach their full potential." She never tagged me directly, but she didn't need to. The engagement metrics were substantial, with comments from industry contacts and potential clients. "Congratulations, Chloe. The Chen family empire grows." I felt a surge of professional outrage. She was leveraging my corporate reputation for her personal brand, creating confusion in my business network about our relationship. The communication campaign intensified rapidly. Board members, investors, industry colleagues, suddenly my phone was buzzing with concerned messages. "Victoria, should we be expecting changes to the company structure? Is there a family succession plan we should know about?" They had heard Chloe's carefully orchestrated narrative. I was the generous CEO bringing family members into the business empire I'd built. I spent the evening documenting each fraudulent claim, my analytical mind cataloging evidence with methodical precision. I felt strategically energized. This was a problem I could solve with superior resources and planning. Just as I was preparing to implement countermeasures, my secure line rang. A number I recognized immediately. "Victoria, it's grandmother Eleanor." My pulse quickened. Eleanor had been monitoring this situation from the beginning. I had wondered when she would weigh in. "Grandmother Eleanor, your grandmother Patricia and I have been coordinating our response," she said, her voice carrying retired teacher's authority. "We've documented everything. We know exactly how this operation works. Most importantly, we know how to stop it." I could hear grandmother Patricia in the background. "Tell her we have the evidence," she said, her voice sharp with determined anger. I felt my chest expand with something I hadn't experienced in weeks: the support of true allies. It wasn't just validation, it was strategic partnership. It was the foundation for a comprehensive counteroffensive. Then grandmother Eleanor continued with quiet intensity. "Listen carefully, Victoria," she said, her voice carrying decades of classroom authority. "I've seen this pattern of manipulation destroy families before. I've watched gifted children systematically undermined by jealous relatives. I didn't intervene effectively then. I will not repeat that mistake. You have our complete support." Her words landed with the force of a declaration of war. "I've seen this before." There was institutional knowledge here, documented patterns of family exploitation that needed definitive resolution. This wasn't just about my assets anymore. It was about establishing permanent boundaries against systematic abuse. About a week before my planned counteroffensive, I received a communication that would accelerate my timeline. It was from Margaret's legal team, a carefully crafted document that revealed just how desperate they'd become. Attached was a formal family reconciliation proposal. My strategic mind immediately recognized it for what it was. It was stunning in its presumptuous audacity. The proposal was elegantly simple: if I agreed to voluntarily transfer a 40% stake in my company to Chloe and establish a monthly family support fund of $15,000, they would graciously agree to cease their social media campaign and public reputation attacks. It was presented as a generous compromise, a chance for me to restore family harmony before things escalated to serious legal consequences. I immediately forwarded it to Marcus. His response arrived within minutes: "This is evidence of coordinated extortion. Don't acknowledge receipt. They're testing your resolve and documenting your responses for leverage." Complete radio silence. But the proposal catalyzed something else. It crystallized a perfect strategic opportunity. A calculated, high-risk maneuver that would expose their entire operation. "They're operating from a position of assumed weakness," I explained to Marcus during our emergency consultation that evening. "They believe I'm isolated, vulnerable, desperate to preserve family relationships. What if I weaponize that assumption?" "Explain your strategic thinking, Victoria," he said, his legal mind already anticipating the complexity. "They want direct negotiation? I'll give them exactly what they think they want. I'll contact them personally. I'll express interest in their proposal. I'll request one final family meeting, just the core players at my estate, to discuss terms before involving more attorneys and making this situation truly adversarial." "Victoria, that's an incredibly sophisticated psychological operation. They'll attempt comprehensive manipulation, emotional leverage, coordinated pressure tactics." "Precisely," I said, my voice carrying the cold precision I'd perfected in corporate negotiations. "And that's exactly the behavior I need them to document." It was the most calculated communication I'd ever orchestrated. I drafted the message to my mother with strategic care, each word designed to trigger their overconfidence. I used my secure line, my hand steady with determined purpose. She answered with barely concealed smugness. "Victoria, I was wondering when you'd finally call." I modulated my voice to project carefully controlled uncertainty. "I received Margaret's proposal," I said, allowing a slight tremor of manufactured vulnerability. I think we need to have a serious conversation. Just family. Here at my home, before this situation becomes irreversibly complicated." I could hear her conferring with Richard and Margaret in the background, their voices thick with premature victory. Then she returned with unconcealed triumph. "Excellent decision, dear. We'll be there tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. It's time you understood what real family loyalty means." The next evening, I orchestrated the perfect trap. I arranged my living room to appear appropriately humble: modest furniture, understated lighting, a carefully curated atmosphere of resignation. I ensured my recording equipment was professionally configured, multiple backup systems synchronized and tested. In my state, Single-party consent recording was completely legal for conversations in private residences. I was that consenting party. This wasn't deception, it was comprehensive documentation of their criminal conspiracy. They arrived with the coordinated precision of a military operation. Richard, Patricia, Margaret, and Chloe, the complete alliance. They entered my waterfront estate without acknowledging its obvious luxury, their focus entirely on what they perceived as my imminent capitulation. They surveyed my living space with the entitled satisfaction of conquerors claiming territory. "Victoria," Richard began, settling into my custom Italian leather sofa with proprietary confidence, "we're relieved you finally recognized reality. This resistance has been unnecessarily painful for everyone involved." "I haven't recognized anything," I said with measured calmness. "I wanted complete transparency. I wanted to understand the full scope of what you're demanding and why you believe you're entitled to it." Patricia released an elaborate sigh, the performance of someone bearing an enormous burden of patience. "We're doing this to save you from yourself, darling. Can't you see? We're trying to teach you about real family values. Chloe is your sister. She needs stability and support. You've always been so obsessively independent. So because I've achieved independent success, I'm obligated to subsidize everyone else's lifestyle indefinitely?" "It's not subsidizing," Margaret interjected with sharp authority, her business background evident in her tactical language. "It's investment in family infrastructure. You can afford it. This is about sustainable resource allocation." Richard's voice boomed with manufactured righteousness, his corporate executive persona fully engaged. "This is bigger than money, Victoria. This is about family legacy, about doing what's fundamentally right." I leaned forward deliberately, my strategic mind calculating every angle. I kept my voice barely above a whisper, forcing them to strain forward and speak more loudly. "So the social media campaign, the coordinated pressure tactics, the threats to my business reputation, all of that is justified? You genuinely believe I owe you control over my assets?" Chloe couldn't contain her smug satisfaction any longer, her influencer persona dropping to reveal pure entitlement. "Oh my God, Victoria, stop being so melodramatic. Obviously we know no court would actually force you to give us anything legally. Margaret's attorney explained the whole strategy to us." My blood turned to ice water. My recording devices were capturing every word with perfect clarity. "Then explain the strategy," I said, my voice becoming dangerously quiet. "Make me understand exactly what you're trying to accomplish." Margaret looked directly into my eyes, her corporate ruthlessness fully exposed, apparently convinced of her complete victory. "Because this is the only language you understand," she said, her voice carrying the vicious precision of someone who'd planned this moment for months. "It's comprehensive pressure. It's psychological warfare designed to force compliance through reputation damage and social isolation. It's to make you understand that your individual success means nothing without family approval." Patricia nodded emphatically, her maternal manipulation now weaponized into something much darker. "Public humiliation is a small price for you to pay to learn proper family loyalty and resource sharing." Richard leaned back with satisfied authority. "Your business connections, your professional reputation, your social standing, none of that matters if your own family publicly demonstrates that you're a selfish, ungrateful person who abandons the people who raised you." Click. Perfect documentation. Complete confession. I felt a wave of crystalline clarity wash over me. The hurt, the betrayal, the months of psychological warfare, all of it had just been transformed into legal ammunition of devastating precision. I had captured their entire criminal conspiracy in their own words. I stood up with controlled authority. "Thank you for that comprehensive explanation," I said, my voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone who had just won a complex negotiation. "I believe this conversation has served its purpose completely." They stared at me with sudden confusion, their expressions shifting from triumph to uncertainty. They had expected tears, capitulation, desperate bargaining. Instead, they were seeing the emergence of someone they'd never encountered before, the CEO who had built a multi-million-dollar empire through strategic thinking and calculated risk-taking. As they filed out of my estate with growing unease, Patricia attempted one final manipulation, her hand touching my arm with practiced maternal warmth. "You're making the smart choice, sweetheart," she whispered with declining confidence. I remained completely silent. I simply closed my custom security door, engaged the electronic locks, and leaned against the solid oak frame as my nervous system finally began processing what had just occurred. I retrieved my phone and reviewed the encrypted digital files. 47 minutes of recorded conversation. Multiple backup copies automatically synchronized to secure cloud storage. It was just compressed audio data, but it represented the complete documentation of their systematic fraud and criminal extortion. I had just secured the most powerful evidence imaginable, their own detailed confession of coordinated psychological warfare designed to steal my assets through legal intimidation tactics. The day of my strategic counteroffensive arrived on a crisp, clear morning. I walked into the downtown conference center, my executive briefcase feeling lighter than ever. It didn't just contain documents, it contained the blueprint for a complete corporate restructuring. I saw them across the lobby: Richard, Patricia, Margaret, and Chloe. I almost laughed at their appearance. They were dressed in carefully coordinated business attire that screamed "fake it till you make it." Richard wore an ill-fitting suit that looked rented, Patricia a conservative dress with costume jewelry. Chloe had on what appeared to be a knockoff designer outfit. Margaret wore an expensive blazer, but her desperation was evident in her overly aggressive posture. It was corporate theater, and they were terrible actors. They clustered around Margaret's business attorney, a mid-tier lawyer clearly out of his depth. They kept glancing toward the main conference room where the tech industry quarterly summit was being held, their faces mixing anticipation with barely concealed anxiety. Marcus had insisted on attending as my legal counsel. He positioned himself strategically in the business center, giving my shoulder a confident squeeze before taking his seat among the other corporate advisors. "Pure strategy, Victoria," he whispered. "Execute the plan. You own this room." We were all gathered for what they believed was a mediated settlement conference. The venue was smaller than I'd expected, all glass walls and corporate efficiency. A woman with sharp business attire who I recognized as the mediator informed us the proceedings would begin shortly. Her name was Jennifer Walsh, a respected corporate arbitrator. I sat at the conference table and arranged my presentation materials. My hands were steady, my mind operating with laser precision. The nervousness was completely absent, replaced by the cold confidence I'd developed through years of high-stakes business negotiations. Then the real show began. Through the glass wall, the main conference room filled with tech industry leaders for the quarterly summit's keynote presentations. I could see the live streaming setup, the professional cameras, the industry press preparing for coverage. Margaret's lawyer initiated the proceedings with a presentation that was masterful manipulation disguised as legal argument. He spoke of family obligations, financial responsibilities, Chloe's promising career potential. He showed carefully curated social media posts, images of family gatherings, graduation photos, manufactured moments of sisterly affection. "This is a family seeking equitable resource distribution," he said, his voice projecting false authority. "Ms. Chen has achieved remarkable success, and now her family requests reasonable participation in that prosperity. Not charity, Your Honor, but fair compensation for years of emotional support and foundational investment." He presented their calculations, the itemized list of family contributions to my success. Jennifer Walsh reviewed it, her expression professionally neutral. He then called Chloe to present her case as the primary beneficiary. Chloe spoke in her practiced influencer voice about her struggles as a creative entrepreneur, how financial instability was limiting her potential, and how access to family resources would enable her to contribute meaningfully to our shared success. It was polished performance art. I could feel the attention of the few business observers in our room, some nodding approvingly at the apparent family unity. Then the main event began in the adjacent conference room. "Ladies and gentlemen," the summit moderator announced through the clear glass wall, "please welcome our keynote speaker, Victoria Chen, CEO and founder of Tech Vision Corp., discussing strategic innovation in corporate leadership." The camera feeds went live across multiple industry networks. I could see my professional headshot displayed on the massive screens, my corporate bio being read aloud, my company's valuation and market position highlighted for the tech industry audience. And then I walked into that conference room. The transformation was immediate and devastating. I wasn't the struggling sister anymore. I was the CEO who'd been featured on Forbes covers, the tech leader whose company had revolutionized 3 separate market sectors, the executive whose strategic decisions affected thousands of jobs and millions in market capitalization. I took the stage with a commanding presence I'd perfected through years of board meetings and investor presentations. My voice carried the authority of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. Innovation requires the courage to sever unproductive relationships, I began, my voice carrying clearly through both conference rooms. Whether in business partnerships, vendor contracts, or strategic alliances, successful leaders must identify exploitation and eliminate it decisively. Through the glass wall, I could see my family's faces transforming from confusion to dawning horror. The mediator had paused our proceedings to watch the keynote, clearly recognizing the magnitude of what was unfolding. I continued my presentation, each word precisely chosen. "In my experience, the most dangerous business relationships are those that disguise systematic resource extraction as emotional obligation. These relationships must be terminated immediately, regardless of historical sentiment." The industry audience was captivated. The live stream was broadcasting to thousands of corporate leaders, and my family was watching their entire narrative collapse in real time. "For example," I said, looking directly at the camera, "my company recently severed a long-term contract with Richmond Development Group due to systematic billing irregularities and fraudulent resource claims. The decision resulted in immediate cost savings of over $400,000 annually." Richard's face went completely white. Richmond Development Group was his employer. I had just announced the contract termination that would eliminate his position and destroy his career prospects. I concluded my presentation to sustained applause, then returned to our conference room where absolute silence had descended. Jennifer Walsh was staring at her tablet, clearly researching my actual corporate position and financial status. "Ms. Chen," she said carefully, "I believe there may have been some misrepresentation regarding your financial circumstances." I smiled with cold precision. "Indeed. I'd like to present evidence of systematic fraud and extortion." For the next 20 minutes, I deconstructed their entire operation with corporate efficiency. I didn't use emotion. I used forensic accounting. The defendants claimed I was financially struggling. Exhibit A is my company's latest SEC filing, showing $47 million in annual revenue. Exhibit B is documentation of $432,000 in fraudulent family contribution extractions over 12 years. Exhibit C is evidence of their coordinated social media campaign designed to damage my professional reputation for personal financial gain. I presented the recorded conversation where they admitted to psychological warfare and systematic extortion. Jennifer Walsh listened with increasing alarm. Margaret's lawyer was frantically taking notes, clearly recognizing his clients had committed multiple felonies. Finally, I addressed them directly for the first time. "This isn't a family dispute," I said, my voice carrying boardroom authority. "This is documented corporate fraud, attempted extortion, and conspiracy to commit theft through fraudulent representation." Then I delivered the final strategic strike. Effective immediately, all financial support to any party involved in this extortion attempt is permanently terminated. Additionally, I'm filing formal criminal charges for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Richmond Development Group's contract with Tech Vision Corp has been terminated due to the criminal conduct of employee Richard Patterson. The silence was absolute. Through the glass wall, I could see industry colleagues beginning to gather, drawn by the drama unfolding in our conference room. Jennifer Walsh looked at Margaret, then at their lawyer, her professional composure barely containing her disgust. "This mediation is terminated," she announced. "I'm required to report suspected criminal activity to the appropriate authorities. I suggest all parties retain separate legal counsel immediately." It was over. I had won completely. I stood there, my hands relaxed at my sides, my corporate empire intact and stronger than ever. I looked at each of them, their faces showed pure, unfiltered devastation. They had gambled everything on my continued submission, and they had lost their financial security, their social standing, and their freedom. In that moment, they weren't family anymore. They were simply failed adversaries in a business war they were never qualified to fight. Leaving the conference center felt like stepping out of a corporate war zone. The air outside was crisp and energizing, and for the first time in months, I could breathe freely with the satisfaction of complete victory. Marcus was waiting for me by his car, his professional composure barely containing his excitement. He didn't speak immediately, he just extended his hand for a firm, congratulatory handshake. "Flawless execution, Victoria," he said with genuine admiration. "You didn't just win, you established permanent corporate dominance." The victory was intoxicating, but I understood this wasn't the conclusion. People like Richard, Patricia, Margaret, and Chloe don't gracefully accept total defeat. They escalate desperately. I was absolutely correct. The retaliation was immediate and transparently pathetic. 2 days after the conference confrontation, Margaret launched her desperate counteroffensive. It was a series of increasingly unhinged LinkedIn posts and professional emails. Victoria Chen thinks corporate success gives her the right to destroy family relationships, one post declared, clearly written during an emotional breakdown. She's weaponized her business position to humiliate people who supported her. The tech industry should know what kind of person they're celebrating. Chloe's response was more predictably theatrical. She created an elaborate social media campaign. The theme was surviving corporate family abuse. The content was professionally photographed victim imagery. The narrative was pure fiction that would have impressed Hollywood screenwriters. She claimed her successful CEO sister had used business leverage to systematically destroy her family's financial security, leaving her psychologically traumatized and financially devastated. She was seeking donations for therapy and rebuilding. I felt a calculated surge of strategic energy, but Marcus's corporate wisdom immediately provided perspective. "Document everything," he advised when I called him, my mind already formulating counterattack scenarios. "Screenshot all content. Archive the posts. This isn't just embarrassing, Victoria. It's criminal defamation. It's tortious interference with business relationships." We executed exactly that strategy. We compiled a comprehensive digital evidence portfolio, post-confrontation defamation campaign. It was impressively substantial. Margaret escalated from social media attacks to attempting direct interference with my business relationships, contacting Tech Vision Corp clients with fabricated stories about my unstable family situation and questionable ethical judgment. It was professionally reckless. It was designed to damage my corporate reputation and threaten my revenue streams. Armed with the documented evidence, screenshots of the defamatory social media campaigns, saved communications from Margaret's business interference attempts, detailed logs of Chloe's fraudulent fundraising activities captured by my digital monitoring systems, I returned to legal action. This time, I wasn't defending. I was prosecuting. Obtaining the comprehensive restraining orders was remarkably straightforward. The evidence was overwhelming and professionally documented. The judge, a different magistrate specializing in business law, granted emergency injunctions without hesitation. Margaret was legally prohibited from contacting my business associates or clients. Chloe was barred from using my name, image, or any reference to our relationship in her social media content. The fraudulent fundraising campaign was terminated after I filed detailed reports with both the platform and federal authorities, complete with links to the recorded confessions and documented evidence of systematic fraud. It had raised $847, mostly from her confused social media followers who didn't understand the actual situation. The final confrontation arrived about a week after the legal injunctions were served. It was Richard calling from an unknown number, his voice dramatically different. The corporate authority was completely gone, replaced by the desperate tone of someone whose career had just imploded. "Victoria," he said, his voice barely steady, "Margaret is having a complete breakdown. You've destroyed her professional reputation. The restraining orders have made this a public scandal." I stood in my executive home office, looking out at the waterfront view that represented everything I'd built independently. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The anger had transformed into strategic clarity. The hurt had crystallized into unshakable boundaries. All that remained was the pure satisfaction of total victory. "She committed criminal defamation, Richard," I said, my voice carrying boardroom authority. "Corporate consequences follow corporate crimes. This needs to end," he pleaded desperately. "This is destroying everyone involved." Patricia won't stop crying. Chloe is having panic attacks. My career is over. "This isn't about me anymore," I said, and the words carried the weight of absolute finality. "This is about all of you. You initiated corporate warfare. You're experiencing the standard market consequences. What do you want from us, Victoria?" he asked, his voice breaking completely. "What will it take to stop this professional destruction?" I considered his question with the same analytical precision I applied to business decisions. What did I want? An apology? Financial compensation? Continued punishment? I realized with crystalline clarity that I wanted none of those things. What I had wanted was something they could never provide: genuine family relationships, authentic support, unconditional love without financial exploitation. Since that was permanently impossible, there was only one remaining objective: absolute independence. "I don't want anything from any of you," I said, my voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had achieved complete victory. "I want comprehensive separation. No contact, no interference with my business. No attempts to leverage our relationship for your benefit. Let me operate my empire, the one I built, the one you tried to steal." "But we're your family," he whispered, a final desperate attempt to resurrect the old manipulation tactics. I took a measured breath. It was time to establish the permanent boundary, time to formalize the complete severance. "You were people I shared DNA and history with," I corrected him with clinical precision. "But you forfeited any claim to family relationship when you chose systematic exploitation over genuine support. I'm not the person who destroyed these relationships, Richard. I'm simply the person who stopped subsidizing the destruction." I heard a sharp intake of breath, then desperate silence. I didn't wait for response. I didn't require one. I terminated the call and immediately blocked the number. Then I blocked Patricia's number. Then Margaret's. Then Chloe's. It was an extraordinarily liberating experience. With each decisive action, I was constructing not barriers to isolate myself, but professional boundaries to protect the empire I'd built from future exploitation attempts. For the first time since that family gathering revelation, my waterfront estate felt completely secure. Felt strategically protected. Felt like the headquarters of a successful empire. The next 6 months were like emerging from a corporate hostile takeover into clear market dominance. The silence from my former family was jarring initially, then gradually it became the peaceful quiet of a well-run empire. It was the sound of my own success, uncompromised. The first thing I did was fill my waterfront estate with authentic relationships. I partnered with a local animal rescue and brought home a brilliant, three-legged golden retriever named Atlas. He had been abandoned after an accident, and he had the most resilient spirit I'd ever encountered. His presence transformed the executive spaces into a real home. His gentle patting across the marble floors became the new rhythm of my sanctuary. Then I filled it with chosen family, my real people. Marcus and his wife Jennifer started hosting monthly dinner parties at my estate. We'd cater from the finest restaurants, debate market strategies and investment opportunities, and celebrate our professional victories together. My select circle of business colleagues became my genuine support network. My estate, once a symbol of corporate achievement I had to defend, became a fortress of success and authentic connection. But the most transformative change, the most profound healing, came from an unexpected source, my grandmother Eleanor. She started visiting every Sunday. She'd arrive with fresh flowers from her garden. A successful woman needs beauty around her, she'd say with pride, even though I was 32, and we'd spend the afternoon in my expanded home office. I had finally created the executive retreat I'd always envisioned. She was teaching me about legacy building. She was a wise mentor. She taught me how to identify authentic relationships from transactional ones, how to maintain perspective during success, how to have the patience to build something that would outlast me. We didn't discuss the confrontation with my former family often. We didn't need to. The strategic planning, the shared vision building, was its own form of healing. We were creating sustainable prosperity, not destroying it. One Sunday, we were reviewing my charitable foundation plans. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the city skyline like a golden promise. "You know," my grandmother said, reviewing a proposal for education funding, "you remind me of her." "Of whom, grandmother?" I asked, setting down my executive notes. "My sister Catherine," she said thoughtfully. She rarely discussed her early family. "My older sister." She closed the folder and looked at me, her eyes holding wisdom I had never heard articulated. "When we were young women, my mother, your great-great-grandmother, she was remarkably similar to your mother Patricia. She had clear favorites, and it wasn't Catherine. It was me." I stopped my planning and listened, my strategic mind suddenly focused. "I was the preferred daughter, apparently," she said with a rueful smile. "Everything I accomplished was celebrated. Everything Catherine achieved was minimized. I received the educational opportunities. She got the domestic expectations. When our parents passed, Mother ensured I inherited the family business. I convinced myself it was deserved. I rationalized that I had earned preferential treatment. Catherine. She never protested publicly. She simply established her own enterprise one day and relocated to another state. We maintained minimal contact afterward. She built an impressive life independently, a very successful one, but she never returned home. She picked up her reading glasses and examined them, her expression distant. I was young. I was entitled. And I was complicit. I stood by and watched my mother systematically undervalue my sister because it advantaged me financially. And I have carried that guilt every single day for the past 55 years. She finally looked directly at me, her eyes bright with determined clarity. "When your mother Patricia began implementing the same favoritism pattern with you and Chloe, I recognized my mother's behavior in her, and I saw my sister in you, and I saw myself in my own history, the young woman who was too comfortable and too selfish to challenge the system." She reached across and placed a firm, supportive hand on mine. I couldn't repair what I allowed back then, but I promised myself I wouldn't remain silent again. I wouldn't permit history to repeat itself. "Supporting you, Victoria. It was the most crucial thing I've accomplished in decades. You didn't just protect your assets. You shattered a generational pattern, a destructive cycle that has damaged this family for generations. You have no concept of how proud I am of your strength." I couldn't find words. I sat there, surrounded by the scent of fresh flowers and old wisdom, and I comprehended everything. Her unwavering support, her fierce validation, her quiet strength, it was all an act of redemption. It was her method of protecting the woman she couldn't protect 55 years ago. It was the most valuable inheritance she could have provided. The recovery wasn't straightforward. It wasn't without complications. One evening, several weeks after that conversation, my secure line rang with a call from an unknown number. I considered declining, and answered. It was Patricia, her voice saturated with tears. But they weren't tears of genuine remorse, they were tears of narcissistic self-pity. Victoria, she sobbed, everything is destroyed. It's all ruined. I waited, maintaining professional silence. Richard. He can't even look at Chloe the same way anymore, she wept. Ever since that confrontation, he treats her with obvious disappointment. You've corrupted his perception of his own stepdaughter. You destroyed everything. The old Victoria might have experienced a moment of misplaced guilt. The old Victoria might have attempted reconciliation, damage control, accepting undeserved responsibility. But the old Victoria was gone. She had been strategically restructured, professionally refined, and reinforced with unshakable boundaries. I took a measured breath, the air in my lungs clean and empowering. No, Patricia, I said, my voice quiet but as solid as the executive desk my grandmother and I had selected together. You destroyed it. It was broken for years. I paused, allowing the truth to register completely. I simply exposed what was already there. I terminated the call before she could manipulate further. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt liberated. The final chain had just been severed and discarded permanently. The destructive cycle was definitively broken. It's been over a year now since that conference center confrontation. My life operates with strategic efficiency, and I've discovered that professional peace is extraordinarily powerful. It's not the empty, isolated quiet from before. It's a productive, fulfilling quiet, filled with Atlas's contented breathing and the subtle hum of a thriving enterprise. My home office is my command center. It's where I strategize, innovate, and transform complex challenges into profitable opportunities. My grandmother visits every weekend. We don't analyze the past much anymore. We discuss market expansion, philanthropic initiatives, and whether Atlas needs his quarterly executive health check. Last month, we completed a project we'd been developing for months, a comprehensive family foundation charter, structured to support 8 different educational programs. We reviewed the final documents with satisfaction. The legal framework was elegant and sustainable. It was powerful. It was strategic. It was built for generational impact. As I signed the founding documents, I realized something profound. Building an empire is remarkably similar to strategic planning. You begin with the resources you're allocated. Some assets are strong, some are weak, some are compromised and damaged by previous mismanagement. You can't alter the fundamental nature of your starting position, but you can choose how to deploy it. You must have the courage to divest from toxic relationships, the elements that are parasitic and destructive. It's a painful process. It creates temporary gaps and vulnerabilities. But it's the only path to accessing the strong, valuable assets underneath. Then, with patience and strategic execution, you eliminate the inefficiencies. You integrate the productive elements. You build something new, something that belongs to you, something that can sustain long-term growth. My biological family, the one I was assigned at birth, attempted to convince me I was a minor subsidiary, valuable only for supporting the more important divisions. They tried to appropriate what I had built and transfer it to someone else. But they fundamentally misunderstood the market. My real family is the one I strategically assembled. It's a 78-year-old woman who taught me the value of patience and the power of speaking truth. It's a sharp legal mind who demonstrated the meaning of professional loyalty. It's a 3-legged dog who proves every day that past trauma doesn't prevent future success. It's the colleagues who gather around my conference table, contributing to my vision with genuine enthusiasm. They are my foundation. Not the real estate, not the financial assets, not the corporate valuation, them. This. The empire I built, not from nothing, but from the carefully selected, highest quality elements of a previously mismanaged situation. And it's more powerful than anything I could have ever projected. Thanks for following my strategic journey. I hope it provided valuable insights for your own situation. Have you ever had to fight to protect something everyone told you to sacrifice? I'd love to hear about your experience. Please share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss future case studies.